Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today we will discuss the previous year questions of class 12, chapter 9, the Memoirs of a Chota Sahib. Please like, subscribe, comment and share. These questions are all from the previous years. Question number 1. Who is the Chota Sahib in the Memoirs of a Chota Sahib? It came in 2015 and 18. Answer. The Chota Sahib mentioned in the Memoirs of a Chota Sahib is John Rountree. Question number 2. What position did John Rountree hold before leaving Ceylon a few days after independence? Answer. John Rountree held the position of Senior Conservator of Forests of Assam a few days before independence. Question number 3. Where did John Rountree and his family make their first home at Guwahati? Answer. John Rountree and his family made their first home in a bungalow in Guwahati. Question number 4. How did John Rountree find the weather when he arrived at Guwahati? Answer. John Rountree found the weather cold, but it was getting controllable and the climate was also becoming bearable when he arrived at Guwahati. Question number 5. What are memoirs? Answer. Memoirs are a kind of freshwater fish that Rountree discovers in the river. Question number 6. How was John Rountree related to Assam? Answer. He was the last British Senior Conservator of Forests of Assam. Question number 7. Here in the last lesson, the writer mentions about an island. What is it? Answer. Peacock Island. Question number 8. Where is Peacock Island situated? Answer. At Guwahati. Question number 9. Sometimes we had unusual visitors. Who were these unusual visitors? And answer. Animals, one of which was a tiger. Question number 10. What was the headquarters of the Kamrup district? Answer. Guwahati. Question number 11. What was the bordering Himalayan state Manas sanctuary? Answer. Bhutan. Question number 12. What was the favorite site for the governor's Christmas camps? Answer. The bank of the rivers of Assam. Question number 13. What was the tax given upon by his governor? Answer. The writer tax was to build Christmas camps on the bank of the rivers. Question number 14. Why was the paddy fields divided into small enclosures? Answer. To prevent the flood water running away. Question number 15. What disturbed the writer at Rajapara bungalow? Answer. Bats. Question number 16. What type of trees surrounded the bungalow at Kulsi? Answer. Teak trees. Question number 17. Where was the Hindu temple mentioned by John Rountree located? Answer. The Hindu temple mentioned by John Rountree was located on Peacock Island. Question number 18. Here in the last lesson, the writer mentioned about an island. What is it? Answer. Peacock Island. Question number 19. Where were the two bungalows situated? Answer. One at Kulsi and another at Rajapara. Question number 20. What animals did the author discover in Peacock Islands? It came repeatedly, one in 2024, another 2025. See the questions. Here they have mentioned as animals and here it is written as creature, but the question is same. What creatures did the writer notice in the Peacock Island? Answer. The author discovers monkey on Peacock Island. In Memoirs of a Chota Sahib, the author John Rountree discovers monkeys on Peacock Islands. Located in the Brahmaputra River near Guwahati, the island was home to these playful and agile creatures. Although the author had expected to find peacocks there, it was the monkey that captured his attention during his visit. Question number 20. What lived in a tree outside the bungalow at Rajapara? Answer. There lived a huge fruit-eating bat with a wingspan of 5 feet outside the bungalow of Rajapara. Question number 21. Name the book from which Memoirs of a Chota Sahib is taken. Answer. Memoirs of a Chota Sahib has been taken from the book A Chota Sahib, Memoirs of a Forest Officer. Question number 22. What position did John Rountree hold before leaving Ceylon a few days after independence? Answer. Before leaving Ceylon a few days after independence, John Rountree held the position of Senior Conservator of Forests of Assam. Now we short answer questions for 2 marks. Number 1. What was the belief about the dividing channels between Peacock Islands and the main island of Guwahati? Answer. The author Rountree mentioned that the dividing channels between Peacock Island and the islands of Guwahati was becoming narrower with each passing year. There was a belief that if this channel ever dried up completely, it could signify the end of the British Raj. Question number 2. What does Rountree state about the large wheel close to the bungalow at Rajapara? Answer. Rountree states that there was a large wheel close to the bungalow where an earthquake had once lowered the surface and the land became inundated with water. According to him, it was an eerie spot where 3 skeletons still rose out of water, which brings back memories into one's mind that it was once a dry land. Question number 3. Give a brief description of Peacock Island. Answer. The Peacock Island was situated in the middle of the Brahmaputra River. It can be seen from the veranda of Rountree's bungalow. There was a Hindu temple in the Peacock Island and its dome was just visible through the trees, if viewed from the veranda. Unlike its name, peacock were nowhere to be found and only monkeys roamed in the island. Question number 4. What does Rountree say about the river banks in Manas Sanctuary? Answer. Rountree said that the river banks were the favorite site for the governor's Christmas camps, and it was his duty to build it, for which he sometimes received letters of thanks from him. Question number 5. What unusual visitors did Rountree have in his bungalow one night? Answer. John Rountree mentioned that the unusual visitors was a tiger which was perhaps washed up by a flood. He also informed that he got the punk marks of a large cat which were traceable seen in the compound. Question number 6. Why did Rountree like the forest bungalow at Kulsi? Answer. The forest bungalow at Kulsi was located on a wooden spur above the river and was comfortable and delightful. That is why Rountree liked the forest bungalow at Kulsi. Question number 7. What does Rountree talk often in Memoirs of a Chota Sahib? Answer. Rountree often talks about the time he spent in Guwahati and its neighboring areas in the Memoirs of a Chota Sahib. Question number 8. What information does the author give us about Manas Wildlife Sanctuary? Answer. The author gives a very less information on Manas Wildlife Sanctuary. He says that in the Manas Sanctuary, which was bordering the Himalayan state of Bhutan, there were few rhinos. There were full of mussels in the river. Question number 9. Describe the author's experience of crossing a flooded river on horseback on the north bank of the Brahmaputra. Answer. Once the narrator crossed a flooded river on the horseback. With difficulty, he persuaded his horse to plunge into the water, then slipped over his croups and hung on to his tail, which he was able to use as a rudder. When the narrator pushed the horse to the right, it veers to the left, and when he pushed it to the left, the horse veers to the right, and in this way, eventually they made a safe landing on the other side of the river. Question number 10. Briefly describe the scene observed by the author from the veranda of his bungalow on the bank of the Brahmaputra. Answer. The author on tree described that from the veranda of his bungalow he had a splendid view of the river is shipping, and beyond the Himalayas, in the foreground was Peacock Island with a dome of a Hindu temple just visible through the trees. Question number 11. What is the belief about the dividing channels between the Peacock Island and the mainland of Guwahati that the authors mention? Answer. The author Rontri mentioned that the dividing channels between the Peacock Island and the mainland Guwahati was becoming narrower with each passing years, and there was a belief that if this channel ever dried up completely, it would mean the end of British Raj. Question number 12. What does the author says about the importance of Guwahati? Is this statement true in our time today also? Answer. The author Rontri says that Guwahati was a significant place during his tenure in Assam, as it served as an entry point to the people who wanted to travel to Assam. In his time, people traveling to Calcutta and Shillong or to districts further up the valley, they had to pass through Assam on their way. Sometimes, people also tend to stay overnight at Guwahati during their journey. Yes, the statement is also true in our time today also. Question number 13. What character of the north bank of the Brahmaputra does the author refer to? Answer. The author Rontri says that the north bank of the Brahmaputra was a vast remote stretch of sandbanks. Between the sandbanks of Brahmaputra and the Himalayan foothills. He further explains that it was a strange place where the rivers dried up in hot weather or suddenly disappear underground. He also added that there was a numerous bills replete with wildfowl, peafowls scattered to the grass. Question number 14. What information does the author give us about Manas Wildlife Sanctuary? Answer. The author Rontri tells us that the Manas Wildlife Sanctuary was bordering the Himalayan state of Bhutan, and a few rhinos were present there. He also says that the river were full of mussels, and their banks were favorite site for the governor's Christmas camps, and it was his task to build it. Question number 15. Relate the author's remnants to the forest bungalow at Kulsi. Answer. The forest bungalow at Kulsi was situated at the south bank. The reserve forest mostly consisted of sal trees, more like an English woodland. The bungalow there was delightfully situated on a wooden spurs above the river. Question number 16. At what time of the year was the north bank delightful? Answer. The north bank of the Brahmaputra was described as delightful during the cold weather, which was the time when the climate was more pleasant and comfortable. Question number 17. Who was John Rountree? Answer. John Rountree was the author of Memoirs of Chota Sahib. In his book, he recounts his experience while residing in Guwahati, describing his grandeur of the Brahmaputra river, unusual encounters, and the challenges he faced during his lifetime in Assam. He was also the last British senior conservator of forests in Assam. Now it's long answer questions for 5 marks. Question number 1. Describe Rountree's experience of crossing a flooded river on horseback. Answer. The author Rountree had a terrible experience of flood while he was in Assam. He describes that during the rainy season many problems arises in the north bank. One such big problem was flood. Once he tried to cross the river bank on horseback during the floods, but it was very difficult. He somehow persuaded his mount to plunk into the water, but he suddenly slipped over his crops and hung on to the tail of the horse, which he used as a rudder. He observed that when he pushed it to the right, the horse veered to the left and vice versa. Eventually, he and his horse managed to make a safe landing on the other side of the river. Question number 2. Give a description of bungalow at Guwahati where John Rountree stayed. Answer. John Rountree's bungalow at Guwahati was on the Brahmaputra's bank with a veranda offering views of the rivers, Himalayas and Peacock Island. It had a portico, lime wash walls and woodwork painted with earth oil, creating a scene of peaceful residence. Question number 3. Relate Rountree's experience of flood in Assam. It came in 2018. The author narrated 2 instances of experiencing flood on the north bank of the Brahmaputra during the monsoon. Once he forded one of the flooded rivers on horseback. It was not an easy task. He persuaded his mount to plunge into water with great difficulty. However, he slipped over his crops the next moment and hung on to the horse's tail. Later, he discovered that the tail can be used as a rudder. Both he and his horse came out of the deadly situation without any injuries and made it to the other side of the Brahmaputra. In the other instance, he was traveling with his family on the north bank. Before they could safely return to the monsoon broke out. Driving through the roads became extremely dangerous and most of the roads were built upon embankments in order to raise above the normal flood level. Further, these roads were narrow and single-track affairs. Rountree and his family had to experience a bumpy ride before they could find their way back onto the road. The road they were on was motorable but slippery, so one skid led to another and eventually they slid over the edge to a paddy field some 6 feet below the road. Question number 4. Why, according to the author, during the rainy season, life in the North Bank was miserable? Or, describe the author's experience of floods on the north bank of the Brahmaputra during the monsoon. Answer. According to the author, during the cold days, the north bank of the Brahmaputra river was delightful. But in the rainy season, it was the best to avoid the place as it was hotbed of malaria diseases. Traveling at this time may also cause problems. The rivers were overflooded and the bamboos bridges erected at the start of the cold weather were washed away. These bridges sway and cracks alarmingly when a car passes through it, but were immensely strong and extremely useful. Once the narrator crossed one of these flooded rivers on horseback. With difficulty he persuaded his horse to plunge into the water, then slip over his crops and bang on to his tail, which he was able to use as rudder. When the narrator pushed the horse to the right, it burst to the left, and when he pushed to the left, the horse burst to the right. And in this way, eventually they made a safe landing on the other side of the river. Question number 5. Give a geographical descriptions of Guwahati as mentioned by author. Answer. The narrator gives a geographical location of Guwahati was the headquarters of the Kamrup district. It was extended to both the banks of the river Brahmaputra. The north bank had its own characteristics, a vast, lonely, flat, islet land between the sandbanks of the Brahmaputra and the Himalayan foothills. It was a strange place, as the rivers dried up in the hot weather or suddenly disappear underground. The narrator says that sometimes they had hard mess for water. They had to dig for water, which was dirty. It had to be cleaned by dropping into the bucket to precipitate the mud. There was numerous bills, wetlands full of wild fowls, peafowls walked through the grass. In the Manas sanctuary, which was bordering the Himalayan state of Bhutan, there were few rhinos. There were full of masirs in the river. Question number 6. What is a marboat and how is it operated? Answer. A marboat is a type of ferry consisting of plank platforms laid over two open boats placed side by side. It was used to transport people and goods across the river. Marboats were either paddled across manually or operated using a running cable connected to a different cable stretch across the river. In the latter case, the force of the river's current would propel the marboat from one side to the other. Question number 7. Briefly describe the scene observed by the author from the veranda of his bungalow on the bank of the Brahmaputra. Answer. The author gives a very beautiful description of the scene observed from the veranda of his bungalow. The bungalow was situated on the bank of the river Brahmaputra, and from it the view of the river is very distinct and beautiful. In front of the bungalow was a raised portico, and it was used as carport, and on top a veranda from which the narrator and his companions had a splendid view of the river and its shipping and even the Himalayas. In the center was the Peacock Island with Hindu temple, and the dome of the temple was only visible through the trees. The narrator jokes saying that though the name of the temple was Peacock, he only saw there monkey, not peacocks. Question number 8. Relate the author's observation on the use of marboats as a mode of river transport in Assam. Answer. Marboats is a ferry consisting of a plank platform covering two open boats placed alongside one another. These were either paddled across the river or connected by running cables to another stretch across the river, were propelled from one side to the other side by the force of the current. During the flood, marboats were used to cross the rivers. The author observed that it was a tedious performance but worked very well. Constant adjustment had to be made to allow the rise and fall of the river. A whole series of guards or landing places had to be constructed at different levels on the river bank, but traffic was light, and although crossing took time, there were few delays. Question number 9. What character of the north bank of the Brahmaputra does the author refer to? Answer. The north bank had its own character. A vast, lonely, flat, edgeless land between the sandbanks of the Brahmaputra and the Himalayan foothills. It was a strange place as the river dried up in the hot weather or suddenly disappeared underground. The narrator says that sometimes they had hard times for water. They had to dig for water, which was so dirty that it had to be cleaned by dropping into the bucket to precipitate the mud. There were numerous bills, wetlands, full with white fowl. People walked through the grass. In the Manas sanctuary, which was bordering the Himalayan state of Bhutan, there were few rhinos. They were full of mussels in the rivers. Question number 10. Describe the author's experience with bats in the Rajapara Forest, Bangalore. Answer. The Rajapara Forest, Bangalore was equally delightful and charming like the one at Kulsi, which served the needs of the author's round tree. But bats lived in the roof of that Bangalore for which he had bad experience. The presence of the bats was constantly reminded by the dropping of the first smell away remained with them. Moreover, there were less smelly but huge fruit-eating bats with a wingspan of 5 feet which lived in a tree outside the Bangalore. They could come out from the tree in search of food at dusk which appeared to run tree like a strange host of ghostly shape gliding through the air on silent wings. Question number 11. How does the narrator describe his experience on the dusty road of Assam? Answer. The narrator gives a vivid description on the dusty roads of Assam. When they started their travel, before the rain broke, the road was so dry that the surface was almost invisible because of the dust. Driving was very difficult and one could not say whether he would be able to reach his destination safely or not. At one place, construction of road had been in progress and one of the favorite hazards of the roads workers, a race ground, lay concealed from sight under dust cloud. There were no warning signs used for the travelers, or if there were, those were invisible because of dust. It was about 6 inches high. In the car there were the narrator, his wife, the baby, and her ayah, the servants, and others camp equipments. It was strange that not a single spring of car was broke, and the writer expressed his gratitude towards the engineers, but at the same time he says that their bones were left unbroken because they were packed like sardine fish in the car. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Thank you.